So dudes, I'm G and I yap about Rainbow Six Siege. It seems that it's pretty difficult to talk about the game without being negative these days. In fact, in some ways you are algorithmically penalized for not talking about it negatively. To varying degrees, I think people will say that this is because the reality of the situation is that the game does suck and that everyone on the internet is being honest and that the majority is correct and the algorithm is just doing its job, propelling negative content to the top of the page because the game does suck. And anything else that's not exactly along those lines is either being dishonest or on copium or any number of different arguments that could be made. Right now, I think Rainbow Six Siege is in that slump period. I think if you look at a chart on Google Trends, you'll find that we're in the middle of the downward slope. Then next season, we're probably going to be on the upward slope because as far as I can tell, that's going to be some original content, perhaps an operator that ties into the pre-existing Rainbow Six lore from a long time ago, speculated to be Kure Galanos. I have a feeling that next season is going to be received relatively well, and then the next season after that is probably not going to be received particularly well because it's not going to be, really new content. And we haven't had new map content over the course of the year. For today's Yap Sesh, I'm going to talk about why, all things considered, despite the crappy situation that the game is in, which some people have this impression that I don't talk about it for some reason, even though it makes up, a pretty decent bulk of my content, because if I don't talk about it, I'm probably not going to make much money. So I predict that Ubisoft is going to eventually figure it out. I don't think they're going to figure it out tomorrow. I don't think they're going to figure it out next week. I don't think they're going to figure it out next month. But Ubisoft has invested too much money and too much time, and they are making too much money off of this license for them to completely abandon it. And it wouldn't make sense to abandon the game because it has a unique kind of flair that was made evident when I got to play a 2-hour-long game, the commentary of which you are seeing on the screen right now. Basically, Rainbow Six Siege has core gameplay mechanics that are unlike anything else in the market at the time. No other competitive shooter has the level of mechanical depth and strategic scope that Rainbow Six Siege has. No game has this level of destruction, this level of gadget interplay, this level of information gathering interplay, decision-making skills, being able to adapt to new situations, the fine line between playing with your gut or playing off of a strategy. Everything in this game serves as a mental exercise of some kind, and I don't even necessarily liken it to chess. In a previous video, I likened it more to poker with guns. Bluffing is an important aspect of the game sometimes. Being able to conceal what you have is an important aspect of the game. Making risky plays, but sometimes having a big payout is an important aspect of this game. It has precise, snappy gunplay and a really, really enriching, fun, exciting, tactical shooter kind of edge to it that I can't really get from other competitive shooters. The only game that really gave me this kind of this kind of tac shooter high, I guess, was Counter-Strike. And I don't even know if you could really consider Counter-Strike a tactical shooter. I don't think it has enough realistic mechanics to really be put into that category. I think it's only, tangentially related to tactical shooters in the sense of something that you could compare like SOCOM or SWAT or Squad. It's not really the same thing. And Rainbow Six Siege isn't the same thing, but it does have enough of that flavor, I think, especially with the much slower gunplay recently. A bigger emphasis on having your gun up rather than hip firing all the time. It's a lot less of an arcadey shooter than it used to be in 2015, but I do think that has helped it in terms of the actual, enjoyment that I get out of playing the game. Now, as per a conversation I had with Spades yesterday in a video where we talked about that, a lot of people didn't like that. A lot of people didn't like that Ubisoft kept slowing down the game. I personally didn't really care about Ubisoft nerfing guns as long as they committed to a particular kind of approach. One of the problems that I had with Ubisoft's development cycle around the years of 2020 to 2022 was it seemed like they wanted to have their cake and eat it too. They wanted to be able to nerf guns all the time and then also treat the game like an arcadey enough game where we could still keep, people who wanted to be cracked out MLG Pro and lean spam and all that other crap. And the new team that they onboarded in year 8, as far as I can tell, is very, very interested in making sure that the game is a tactical shooter. I think they have a lot of work to do in terms of, being able to reestablish the trust that Ubisoft lost over time. But at the end of the day, as long as the game gets actual support, right? As long as they do what I think they're doing, I don't know for sure. I think that the game will shake up pretty fine because this game has a unique approach to the tactical shooter and the competitive shooter genre. It's really our esports tactical shooter, which some people will write off as slop or that's bad. I think those people are being incredibly short-sighted. I think that there's plenty of fare out there for people who want to play something that's more akin to a game like SOCOM. There's tons of boomer shooters out there if you want to go play those. Those are great, but I think Rainbow Six Siege has been able to do something really unique in the sense that it offers two different flavors of shooter. And I think that is really, really cool. I can't think of any other FPS game that is really approaching it that way. Now, really, a lot of the problems that the game has don't come down to mechanics. Nobody ever really talks about the mechanical design in terms of why the game is suffering or why the game is doing poorly. Because the mechanics are so freaking good. The actual bedrock that you have here, the foundation that Ubisoft is working with, is pretty good. The guys that originally conceived it back in, before 2015, before it released almost, over 10 years ago at this point, really set us up, for success. They're not really involved with the project anymore, but nowadays it seems like you have some people, at least, who have an idea of what they were trying to go for, even if they couldn't really anticipate the influx of Bolo kids who just, took the movement that they had and really, really stretched it to its ultimate conclusion. And I don't think that Rainbow Six Siege should live in the past forever at the same time. As far as I can tell, despite the fact that Operation New Blood has gone quite badly in terms of PR, in terms of market penetration, in terms of the general sentiment and the vibe that people seem to have about the game, I believe that Rainbow Six Siege can weather the storm. I know a lot of people find that statement to be ridiculous. I know a lot of people don't trust me when I say I think that Ubisoft can figure it out. I also think Ubisoft can screw it up. When I say that Ubisoft can figure it out, I'm also, not an idiot. I understand that AAA game developers are going to AAA game develop, and sometimes things happen unexpectedly. Look at how Overwatch 2 shook out with the PvE system that just got, completely cut before it got released. One of the more bizarre examples of how the industry can allocate tons and tons of resources to something and then just say, yeah, no, JK. But after getting to play a 2-hour-long Siege game, yes, a 2-hour-long Siege game in a private 10-man server that I play with some staff throughout the esports scene. It's a little Faceit hub that we have going on. After playing this game, I realized that this is the kind of gaming that I got to experience, this long, drawn out, hours and hours upon hours, without looking at the clock, without checking the time, just completely immersed in the back and forth, and really, the clock just kept going without us even really realizing it. That feeling that I had with gaming that I've had, when I was a teenager, it's very difficult nowadays to replicate that. Sometimes I get that out of single player experiences every once in a while, but I've found that relatively recently, it's very hard to keep my attention even when I'm having a ton of fun with the game, and especially when work gets in the way, when my work schedule gets in the way with producing YouTube videos. Sometimes I just want to get away from the technology. I want to go outside, believe it or not, and actually do something that doesn't have anything to do at all with computers. But Rainbow Six Siege is different. Rainbow Six Siege is unique. It is a unique spin on the tactical shooter genre. Siege's community is extremely passionate, and it's going to be really difficult for them to part ways with this even when it gets at its worst. Something that you may have noticed in the Google Trends chart that I shared at the beginning of the video, these upswings and these downswings are pretty sharp. Every time there's a downswing, though, the game manages to just, somehow miraculously come back from the dead. Every single time, this game gets counted out. A season like this one included, Operation New Blood included. A lot of people forget, right, when they say, yeah, Siege content creators do this every year. They do the whole, we're back and then we're going to be Jover again. Well, it's a vicious cycle, right? Because we're going to be Jover and then we're going to be back again. And this whole cycle of we're Jover, we're back is what Siege is kind of known for at this point. It's kind of become an inside joke. Every single time people think the game is just completely and utterly done for, something happens, whether it's the pandemic where everybody was staying inside and then it really blew up on console, whether it's Jinxie, whether it's the esports scene that really, catapulted it into the mainstream consciousness and got it a lot of sponsorships around 2017 to 2019. every single time this game is considered like, oh, this is a lost cause, it manages to bounce back, despite what Ubisoft does, despite an unpopular balance changes, despite a retraction of the pace of content, despite all of its hiccups. The game is still here and people are still playing it, and I'm still playing it. I'm still making content for it. When I yap about it, when my videos that, are pretty critical of it tend to do obviously much better than the ones where I'm giving it praise, I think that feedback comes from a place of it's disappointing that the game is where it's at. I want the game to do better. I want the game to succeed because I really like it. And that's also a component of the conversation I had with Spades yesterday. Spades told me that he didn't make the video because he hated the game. He didn't talk about the video because he hated it. He spent thousands of hours playing it. He's just disappointed with where it's gone. And I can completely relate to that, even if I don't necessarily agree with everything that he said in that video. I do relate to people being passionate about something and critiquing it to improve it because they want it to be the best version of itself. So I'm not gonna let Zofia Withstand completely ruin everything for me. I think that Mozzie should have kept his freaking shotgun. I think Jaeger should get a damage buff or a different gun or something. There's tons of things that I think Ubisoft could do to repair certain, trusts that they lost. But for example, in the case of Buck, when he lost his frag grenades, now Buck is like one of the best, I would probably say the best solo queue operator. So for example, with that particular thing, anybody who's still complaining about Buck frag grenades in 2024 probably needs to get a life or a job, okay? Because Buck is still really, really good right now. They've managed to kind of work around that many years after the fact. Not to mention the people who are responsible for that decision aren't even, involved in the game anymore, probably. I'm not saying that they got fired because they nerfed his frag grenades, but I'm just saying that, when you have a game that lasts this long, you're going to get different people working in the studio. And that was true even of the Xbox 360 era. I mean, like when you went from Halo 1 to Halo 2 to Halo 3, it wasn't always the same people working in the building on every single title that they put out. Yeah, you had the key players that stayed there for a relatively long amount of time, but you swap people out. I mean, these companies, their job is to make money, right? They've always been here to make money. Whenever I upload a YouTube video like this one, I'm having fun doing it, but if I upload this video and then I don't make any money, that's a waste of my time. If I don't upload something about Siege, then there's a pretty good chance that it's going to affect my bottom line. So I can't really, deviate too far. And in the same breath, Ubisoft can't just completely nuke everything. They can't nuke every single perception that they have about the Tom Clancy and the Rainbow Six license, because they're going to ruin that established fan-based loyalty. And that's part of the reason that I think they ended up leaning into the old school lore. And leaning into the old school lore, I think, was a really smart decision from them, because it allowed them to breathe new life into it and take, a beloved thing and make it into something that could work for a brand new generation, right? A brand new audience that still, wants to experience this kind of gameplay. And that's okay. I think, giving it to the next generation is all right. This is happening with a couple of entertainment licenses relatively recently. Marvel went through a really, really bad patch recently with pretty much everything that they made after Endgame. Quantumania was a disaster. Secret Invasion was a disaster. But if you watch the recent Captain America trailer, it kind of comes off as like a little Jack Reachery, like Tom Clancy's The Avengers. And some people, again, and I don't know how much stock I give this audience. Maybe I give them too much stock just because I'm terminally online, and I think they probably they take up more oxygen out of the room than I think they really do. But a lot of the guys who are really, really upset that, Rainbow Six Siege as it stands, right, isn't a military simulator or something, I think a lot of those guys are self-reporting. Like I said yesterday, when people self-report, that they think they know about firearms and what shooting a weapon is like, when they think that, bolo peeking, for example, is like, oh, that was when it was more tactical. That's more realistic. I think a lot of these guys are not interested in the overall big picture of what makes Rainbow work. I don't think people were interested in the fact that ultimately what Tom Clancy was doing was he was writing pulp fiction. And I don't say pulp fiction like he was making lesser fiction, or that it was bad, or that it wasn't interesting, or that it didn't have artistic merit. But it was for entertainment. It was exciting. It was a what if kind of thing. Take a look at the way the Modern Warfare games went. Yes, that subject material was dark, right? It had some pretty dark moments, but it was still pretty over the top and fantastical. And the developers and the writers were able to disconnect themselves from what they were doing to a certain extent, because what they were trying to do at the end of the day was make an entertaining action movie that you could interact with. And the recent Modern Warfare reboot, you know, obviously there's controversy in terms of you know, how they've approached that, particularly the way that they opened up with the Modern Warfare 2 reboot, where, you know, Google, you know, stuff, because I don't know how much I can talk about it on YouTube without getting demonetized. But you get my point, I think. My point is, I see a lot of different people play this game. I see a lot of different people have, you know, an attachment to it as a brand. And that diversity in and of itself, I think, also speaks to the uniqueness and how much it stands out. I think it's really difficult to stereotype a Siege player unless, you know, you spend a lot of time on the internet. If you go to a LAN event, you'll run into every kind of person at a LAN event for Siege. It's really remarkable just how much breadth the game seems to have in terms of the audience that it attracts. And I think that's because it's so cool. I think that's because it's so good. I'm not sure what's going to happen to the game. I would like it if Ubisoft did certain things a little bit differently, but the only thing I can do is talk about it, hopefully make some money on it, and then see what happens. And if that's how this goes, that's okay. But I'm glad I'm a part of the Siege community, and I would like to be a part of the Siege community for a lot longer, because I think there's a lot of life here, and I think that people are cashing out probably a little bit too early. Even if New Blood and, you know, a lot of things going on right now aren't exactly the best. What do you think? Let me know if you think I'm a crazy person and I'm on copium or something. All right. I'll see you guys later. Thanks for watching. Deuces.